The Senate has confirmed a deputy administrator for the Environmental Protection Agency. Andrew Wheeler was an EPA lawyer in the 90s, but then worked as a lobbyist for many energy companies, including a coal company. At the White House, President Trump says he is moving to cut EPA regulations.
Today I will sign a presidential memorandum directing the EPA to cut even more red tape on our manufacturers.
Trump claimed that the U.S. has been taken advantage of by other countries, and he blamed American lawmakers for that. On Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 293 points today to end at 24,483. It's NPR.
And you're listening to WNYC. I'm James Floyd. A breakaway faction of Democrats in the New York State Senate is hosting a $1,000 per plate fundraiser tonight, even though the group has officially rejoined the mainline Democratic Party. WNYC's Fred Mogul reports.
With great fanfare, the 8 state senators who make up the Independent Democratic Conference announced they'd leave the Republican coalition and work to help Democrats take over the Senate. But the IDC hasn't disappeared entirely. It's hosting a fundraiser tonight in northern Manhattan. Officially, they're promoting Democratic unity, but they're asking donors to make checks out to the Senate Independence Campaign Committee. A spokeswoman says the money is to protect former IDC members in the upcoming primaries. They're facing challengers who say the IDC still can't be trusted and could once again abandon the Democratic fold if the GOP retains its majority in special elections later this month or in November.
15 years ago today marked a turning point of sorts for the city's transit system. WNYC's Kate Hines reports.
Back in the day, you used to hear subway token booth clerks, and there used to be a lot more of them, say things like this. That's because April 12th, 2003 was the last day tokens were sold in the transit system. The MTA had fully phased in the Metro card and was eager to move on. Delivering all those pieces of metal to stations was time-consuming, and then they had to be retrieved by clerks who emptied turnstiles with a bucket and a dustpan. Today, the MTA is in the process of replacing the Metro card. The agency hopes to start phasing some sort of new fare payment system in next year. The new school's chancellor, Richard Collins, spent the day with students, parents, and educators in Staten Island today, part of a week-long effort to introduce stations. Housing Justice Center based here in New York. Hey, Fred.
Hi.
And we're also joined by Justice Montanez. Hey, Justin.
Hi.
Fred, let's start with exactly what was the Fair Housing Act designed to do, and describe what it was like to be a person looking for housing before the act was signed into law.
Well, prior to 1968, we had a considerable amount of discrimination in housing, in all areas of life for that matter. And our metropolitan areas all across the country were actually created to be segregated by government action, by private real estate action, and through the Civil Rights Movement. And after the assassination of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, the Fair Housing Act was finally passed that prohibited for the first time discrimination in housing based on race, color, religion, and national origin. Other protected characteristics came later.
And the act was designed to create equal housing, fair housing, as the act states, right?
Well, the act had two rather remarkable provisions. One was to prevent and prohibit discrimination in housing, but the other part of the act required the Department of Housing and Urban Development and any recipients of federal funds going forward to affirmatively further fair housing. So cities and localities and states and the federal government were supposed to assess whether their housing and community development activities were actually reducing residential racial segregation or perpetuating it. And that's the part that has been largely ignored over the last 50 years.
And your organization is therefore still necessary. Say more about why that is.
Much of the work that's been done in opening up housing opportunities has been through litigation brought by private individuals and fair housing organizations around the country. The government has taken a more passive, complaint-responsive approach, whereas organizations like ours are more proactive and go out into the marketplace to find patterns of discrimination.
Which gets us just into your role in this organization. Tell us a little more about what someone like you, a tester, does for the Fair Housing Justice Center.
So we receive an assignment, and then we'll just go out to a property, inquire about the availability of an apartment, or sometimes purchasing a home or a condo. We gather all the information and bring it back to Fred, and maybe a couple months later, he lets us know that we were told something that was different from what another tester who maybe doesn't look like me was told when they went out and met with the same housing provider.
So to be clear, you're African American.
Yes.
And another tester is white?
Correct. Control tester. Yes.
Fascinating. And you're an actor. You're going into these situations specifically to identify discrimination. What do you take away, Justin, from these encounters? Does it affect how you view the way real estate works in the city? How New Yorkers treat their fellow New Yorkers? What?
Absolutely. What I take away from it is how devastating it is when you find out that you've been discriminated against. Even though I'm an actor, even though I'm portraying a role, when I get the call from Fred and he tells me that I was told a price that was significantly higher than a fellow tester who doesn't look like me, when he tells me that I was told that there were no apartments available and there won't be any available in the next coming months or even years, the impact that it has on you emotionally, it cannot be overstated. It's a really sick feeling in the pit of your stomach.
Does the work that you do for the Justice Center, do you think at some point, self-care will require that you contribute in some other way?
I will never stop doing this work because every single time that I'm out on a test and I'm dealing with an agent, I think about those folks who are not working for the Fair Housing Justice Center. So if I decide that I don't want to do this work any longer, there are so many folks out there who are going to be discriminated against and there'll be no recourse. We'll never know. That they could slip through the cracks. Maybe Fred can't find them in time. Maybe they don't know about the Fair Housing Justice Center, so they're not able to file a complaint, so we're not able to launch an investigation. These are the things that I think about that keep me going, because it doesn't matter at the end of the day how difficult it is for me to have to go through these traumatic experiences. To me, it's even worse that folks are being discriminated against and they'll never know.
Fred, of course, people who live in New York City may know, as Justin has experienced, that many neighborhoods remain heavily segregated because of this kind of discrimination. And that may or may not mean that they know the consequences.
Well, place matters, and where you live can determine the type of education you're going to get, your healthcare outcomes, what kinds of services you're going to receive, what kinds of amenities are in your neighborhood, how much money you're going to accumulate in terms of wealth. So discrimination has a profound impact, literally a life and death impact on people. when we talk about all of the modern day inequalities that exist in our society, you really can point to housing and where you live as being fundamental in that cycle.
The Fair Housing Justice Center just today, I think, announced a lawsuit against the state of New York and some adult homes for discriminating against people who use wheelchairs. Is that right? Tell us about that.
That's correct. We do a lot of different types of systemic investigations. The one you reference is a case where we received complaints from individuals who were living in adult care facilities that have assisted living programs, and they were being told they would no longer be allowed to live there if at any point during the day they used a wheelchair. And then we expanded our investigation to look at state regulations and found that there were actually regulations which these facilities were following, allowing them to basically ban wheelchair users from assisted living facilities in New York.
And Justin, I saw you shaking your head. It is clear that as a black man, you feel great empathy for other underserved communities.
Absolutely. And just the thought of folks being denied quality housing because they use a wheelchair, I think it should be offensive to everyone, to every American. Just the notion that you would be denied housing that is legally available to you, it's very disconcerting.
Fred Freiberg is the executive director of the Fair Housing Justice Center. Justin is an actor who works with the center as a tester. Thanks to you both.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
In response to our request for comment regarding the organization's discrimination lawsuit against the state of New York, a spokeswoman for the Department of Health said the department does not comment on pending litigation. Next up in our 1968 series, the Columbia University Uprising and Coretta Scott King in New York.
The infamous Access Hollywood video is again in the news. Multiple outlets are reporting that FBI agents were looking for evidence related to the video on Monday when they raided the office of President Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen. NPR's Tamara Keith explores why the video might be of interest to investigators.
It was Friday, October 7th, 2016, late in the afternoon, when the Washington Post broke the story. There was a video shot by the entertainment news show Access Hollywood in 2005 and never before released, with then reality TV star Donald Trump using vulgar language to describe his treatment of women.
And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the... I can do anything.
That video was an existential crisis moment for Trump's campaign and prompted a rare apology from the candidate. But what does that have to do with the FBI? The answer is we don't know for sure. But one theory is it relates to the $130,000 payment Trump lawyer Michael Cohen made to adult film actress and director Stormy Daniels after she agreed to sign a non-disclosure agreement in late October 2016. She claims to have had an affair with Trump in 2006 and told her story last month on 60 Minutes.
Was it hush money to stay silent?
Yes. The story was coming out again.
And the reason it was coming out, at least in part, goes back to the Access Hollywood video. 2 days after the video came out, Trump was questioned about it in a televised debate and said this.
Nobody has more respect for women than I do.
So for the record, you're saying you never did that?
Things that frankly, you hear these things I said, and I was embarrassed by it. But I have tremendous respect for women.
Have you ever done those things?
Have respect for me. And I will tell you, no, I have not.
But then women started coming forward, several of whom said they were upset by his denial.
Another woman has now come forward to accuse Donald Trump of inappropriately touching her. She says,
avalanche of accusations.
In a legal filing, Daniels' attorney says she decided to tell her story too and began conversations with various media outlets, which brought her to the attention of Michael Cohen. 10 days after the Access Hollywood video came out, Cohen created the Limited Liability Corporation that would, on the eve of the election, enter into a non-disclosure agreement with Daniels to prevent her from going public. Paul S. Ryan is Vice President for Policy and Litigation with Common Cause, which earlier this year filed complaints with the Federal Elections Commission and the Justice Department about the Stormy Daniels payment. Their argument is that it was an illegal campaign contribution. He thinks investigators could be interested in the Access Hollywood video because it gets at motive. why it would be important to keep other allegations from coming out.
Any concern that Michael Cohen had about the Access Hollywood tape having gone public, any concern that was shared by Donald Trump, may be relevant to explaining why Michael Cohen and perhaps Donald Trump paid Stormy Daniels when they did to keep her quiet.
If Cohen paid Daniels to keep her story from getting to voters, that could be a violation of campaign finance law, says Rick Hassan, a professor at the University of California, Irvine.
If Cohen was indeed the person who paid the money, this would be an excessive in-kind campaign contribution if it can be shown that it was motivated to help the campaign, as opposed to being motivated for personal reasons, such as to help Trump with his marriage.
But he cautions there is much that is still not known.
There are issues of fact and issues of law that are very uncertain at this point.
And this is but one theory about why the Access Hollywood video may be relevant to investigators. Another, less than an hour after its release, WikiLeaks began publishing emails hacked from Hillary Clinton's campaign. Tamara Keith, NPR News.
Mayor de Blasio has been urging New Yorkers to connect friends and family members with his mental health initiative ever since police officers shot and killed a mentally ill man in Crown Heights, Brooklyn last week. But critics say the mayor may be overselling the hotline's ability to handle cases like Saheed Vassal's. WNYC's Gwen Hogan reports.
Here's the mayor on WNYC's Brian Lair show last week asking people to call the city's mental health hotline.
888-NYC-WELL. Any New Yorker can call that number, 888-NYC-WELL. Get a trained counselor 24/7. Get connected to help. Get appointments.
The hotline was rolled out in 2016. It also offers counseling over the phone. In extreme cases, it can trigger an emergency team to intervene in person. This is the mayor on New York One's inside City Hall.
It's not just like the hotlines in the past. This is something I think more developed.
The critics say the hotline and its 24 rapid response teams weren't designed to handle severe mental illness, like in Vassal's case. DJ Jaffe is the founder of mentalillnesspolicy.org. He says the mayor's hotline fails families in crisis.
Families call the number, and what they're looking for is a crisis intervention team. And they're told, well, it'll take 2 days or more for one to come out, and if they're dangerous, call police.
The city says it can take up to 48 hours to respond to hotline calls for emergency help. But the mayor says the city is deepening services. About 8,000 police officers have gotten training to de-escalate mental health crises. Still, callers aren't guaranteed when will show up if they dial 911. And police have killed 9 emotionally disturbed people since 2015. Gwen Hogan, WNYC News.
Undocumented, but paying the price of citizenship.
I actually filed my taxes last weekend. Last Saturday, I woke up really early and I went to my accountant to file, knowing that I wouldn't benefit for any of other programs that people here who are citizens would be able to benefit from.
Immigrants pay taxes to make a case for their permanent status with limited benefit from the programs they support. It's next time on The Takeaway, weekday afternoons at 3 on 93.9 FM.
Support for WNYC comes from LV Wood, manufacturers of bespoke wood flooring. Bespoke wood floors are made to order and are all made in the USA. The New York showroom at 24 West 20th Street is open to the public. More at lvwood.com.
It's All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Audie Cornish.
And I'm Mary Louise Kelly. Ask faith leaders in the U.S. about their biggest challenge, and they're likely to say this: how